When Steve Jobs was diagnosed with his cancer, he was surrounded by a team of medical experts, good doctors, good surgeons. He also had his wife and his other brilliant tech CEOs as his friends to support him. His dearest friend, Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, who had just survived prostate cancer, spent the entire evening with Steve Jobs in his house to talk about his cancer diagnosis after he found out. And basically, everyone around Jobs was telling him one single thing. They said, "Steve, please just do surgery to remove the goddamn tumor." But he didn't. He instead drank juice cleanses and saw a psychic regularly in the hopes to fight his cancer. It's now 2025 and Steve Jobs has been dead for 14 years. Yet according to statistics, there are more than a third of patients that use these kind of alternative treatments to fight their cancer, and the numbers are actually growing. Why are there so many people that believe in this? You're probably immediately thinking, these people are just dumb. They didn't receive good education, or they don't believe in science. Well, Steve Jobs isn't dumb. He's in fact probably one of the most brilliant people of his generation. And as an oncology pharmacist, I actually see these kind of patients on a daily basis. And I'm really interested in finding out why people believe in these alternative cancer treatments. And honestly, after doing a whole bunch of research, I now have a new understanding of why Steve Jobs chose the natural way instead. So Steve Jobs died in October 2011. He was 56 years old. In October 2011, Apple had just launched the iPhone 4S along with Siri. But his actual cancer diagnosis was all the way back in 2003, and he was only 48 years old at that time. In 2003, Apple had just launched their iPods, I believe. At that time, I did not own any Apple products because in my mind, people who owned Apple products were really rich. I don't know if that was just a misconception of mine or if iPods were actually more expensive than other MP3 players. At that time, he was running not one, but two massive companies, and he's been doing that since 1997. Can you guess which two? Yeah, they were Apple and Pixar. The work was so intense that he got sick really often. He would come home and would be so tired that he literally cannot even talk after getting home. And he got frequent kidney stones. Kidney stones can be partially caused by just not hydrating yourself well enough. And it was actually his kidney stone that led him to find out about his cancer. He had to do a CAT scan and they saw shadows in his pancreas. Steve Jobs would later blame his cancer on the fact that he was running both Apple and Pixar at the same time, and all that stress has damaged his immune system. We'll come back to this in a moment. Finding out that you have cancer is probably one of the worst news that you can get, but you know what the unbelievably good news his doctor delivered him? After doing a biopsy, which is taking some cell samples from his pancreas directly and testing those in a lab, it turns out he didn't have pancreatic cancer. He has something called neuroendocrine tumor, or NET. So what is NET? NET stands for neuroendocrine tumor. The name kind of makes no sense, and I was confused too when I first learned about them. And these are cancers that come from your endocrine cells. And endocrine cells are the cells in your body that produce hormones. For example, insulin is produced in the pancreas, and insulin are produced by pancreatic endocrine cells. I'll give you an analogy. Imagine your pancreas is a slice of pizza. Actually, it kind of looks like one. Majority of the pizza is the actual dough, right? And that's the pancreatic cells. But on the pizza, you have slices of pepperoni sprinkled all over, and those pepperoni are the endocrine cells. Only 4% of the people that have pancreatic cancer has this kind of neuroendocrine cancer, so it's super rare. Why is this such good news? That's because with pancreatic cancer, the prognosis is not good. In Canada, about 10% of the people diagnosed with pancreatic cancer will survive for at least 5 years. That means the 5-year survival rate is only 10%. But with NETs, the prognosis is so much better. If the cancer is local, which means it hasn't spread to anywhere else, the survival rate is 79%. So 79% versus 10%. Apparently, Steve Jobs' doctor was so happy reading his biopsy results that she almost cried. I've made a video tier ranking all types of cancers, and some people got a little offended by that actually. But the reality is, all cancers are bad, but some are just worse than others. So it's 2003 and 48-year-old Steve Jobs just found out about his cancer diagnosis. The first people he told this to are obviously his wife, Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel, and his other friends who were important people in the Silicon Valley. But to the horror of these people that loved him, he told them that he will not have surgery. And this is what he said: "I really don't want them to open up my body, so I'm gonna try if a few other things would work." But surgical removal of this type of cancer net was the only proven medical approach for this type of cancer. But instead, he did these types of treatments: a strict vegan diet with a lot of fresh carrots, acupuncture, herbal remedies that included eating horse shit and horse shit roots. I don't even know what horse shit roots are, but it definitely does not sound appetizing. Bowel cleansing, and hydrotherapy, which again, I didn't really know what it was. I had to look it up. Apparently, it's a form of therapy that involves using water for treatment, like for example, exercising in water. For someone as mighty and brilliant as Steve Jobs, in the face of cancer, he's still just a patient. He still needs to be guided by healthcare professionals to receive any type of treatment. I'm sure he didn't just go on the street and pick up horse shit and ate that. He had to have gotten that information from somewhere and bought that product from someone. Then who are these healthcare professionals that convinced Jobs? Or maybe if he didn't need convincing, they still continued to lead him down this path and told him this is good for your cancer. What kind of healthcare professionals would prescribe these? I'll get to that in a minute. Let's first look at this from Steve Jobs' perspective, the people who are having the cancer. It turns out he's not alone in this. The term conventional medicine is used to refer to recognized treatments, accepted by medical experts as proper to treat diseases and widely used by healthcare professionals. The method that Steve Jobs used we call complementary and alternative medicines, or CAMs. These include practices like mind-body medicine, naturopathy, and energy medicine. And people can use these complementary and alternative medicine to either completely replace conventional medicine, which is what Steve Jobs did. They can use it to manage side effects of conventional therapy. I'll give you a very common example. We have patients who are going through chemotherapy and they have a ton of side effects like nausea, feeling tired, low appetite, and they might choose CAM, like taking a high-dose vitamin or other supplements to try to lower these side effects. Without judging at first whether or not this is a good idea, I think at least it's a natural thought process for people to try this. Usually to manage chemotherapy side effects, in conventional treatment, we would offer other medications, right, to help with the side effects. But if people want to try something more natural, and if they're safe, we have nothing against them. But there are other reasons why people seek complementary and alternative medicine when they have cancer. One of the biggest reasons is they want to take more control. Studies have shown that many people feel really overwhelmed with their diagnosis, and especially when they have to all of a sudden go through chemotherapy and radiation therapy, which causes a ton of side effects. CAM is sort of offering them a way to feel like they're actively taking control in this whole process. There are also a lot of people that complain that conventional treatments are not personalized enough, and they think CAM is a personalized way to treat their cancer. And of course, CAM allows for customization, right? You can pick and choose certain herbs and supplements and certain treatments that you do, and it's totally based on your individual preference. And this kind of gives them a psychological empowerment. It makes them feel more engaged in the treatment. They feel less stressed and it gives them more relief. And they believe that this is overall contributing to their well-being, which is crucial in cancer treatment. And going back to what Steve Jobs thought was the cause of his cancer, which is being overworked and overstressed by running two big companies, this could be one of the single most popular reasons for people to choose CAM. And it's a reason that I hear constantly from patients. They want to boost their immune system. Now, if you've seen my video reacting to Cells at Work episode 1, I've talked about how your own body cells have a defense mechanism to kill cancer cells. So if you haven't watched that, I'll link that below. But many people see herbal remedies, natural supplements, or acupuncture as just ways to boost the immune system. And they think this is a totally natural approach rather than relying on pharmaceuticals. And naturally, since radiation therapy and chemotherapy are indirectly killing the cells of your immune system, like white blood cells, lymphocytes, neutrophils, it's kind of a natural thought process for patients to look for ways to boost that. to make their white blood cells grow back and to have their natural defenses back again. But unfortunately, what a lot of patients fail to realize is that if the chemotherapy is actively killing your white blood cells, just by taking some antioxidant supplements and those marketed to boost your immune system, it's really not going to help them grow back. You're having this literal poison blasting throughout your body, killing the cancer cells along with other fast developing cells like your hair and white blood cells. What's taking some vitamin C pills going to do? It won't do anything. It's not going to counteract the entire effect of chemotherapy. But stats show that this is not just Steve Jobs that believes in this. There are so many others that seek alternative treatment. In this study that looked at women with breast cancer, they found out that 80% of women with breast cancer are using CAMs. This Australian study that looked at all different types of cancer also found that more than 27% of cancer survivors are using CAMs. So at this point, we can't really look at CAM as this unusual approach for treatment, because so many people are on it. And what's more alarming is that the usage is actually increasing. In 2005, 81.9% of women report to be using either a CAM product or using a CAM practice or seeing a CAM therapist at some time in their life, as compared to only 66.7% in 1998. So there's definitely a huge increase. My mom's best friend, who was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, believes in this treatment system that's cure within yourself. So the treatment teaches these people with cancer to believe that their body has the power to kill the cancer cells. And they show examples of people who gave up traditional therapy or surgery and believed in this modern new belief system, and somehow their cancer went away. So Steve Jobs basically did all of these. The juice cleanse would be like herbal treatment, acupuncture, which is the alternative system, and he also saw a psychic, so that's the mind-body type. How would someone smart like Steve Jobs be convinced that these treatments would work? Well, we said a lot of the herbal products claim that they can boost the immune system and they're letting the body naturally fight off the cancer. Acupuncture also claimed that it can improve immunity and also help with the symptoms of having cancer. And I actually looked up the specific mind-body class that Steve Jobs attended. They apparently teach you how to express away your negative feelings, and that somehow can force the cancer to go away. Going back to our original question, if you were someone like Steve Jobs that studied your whole life in the science and engineering and worked as the leader in these industries, what makes you believe that these CAM treatments can work? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that these alternative treatments are so easily accessible now. And they're actually provided by licensed medical professionals. You no longer need to travel to Nepal, climb the highest peaks of Mount Everest, knock on the monk's door, live there for 3 months, and kneel in front of the promise of life and longevity, and basically beg the master to teach you their ways. There are professionals called naturopathic doctors that are as prevalent as just a regular doctor. They have their own clinics, they have their own office hours, they sell their own products, just like any other doctors do. They are actually licensed through their governing body, and they can diagnose, they can prescribe treatments, and they're basically using a different belief system that the conventional treatment is rooted in. They actually also have a lot of subspecialties like pediatrics, endocrinology, and oncology. In our hospital, if a doctor sees that the patient is taking a whole list of natural and herbal products, they'll usually send them to a pharmacist who will be the one checking against these products with their conventional treatment like chemotherapy and radiation therapy to make sure there's no harm. And a lot of the times when the pharmacist asks them, hey, who prescribed you all of these herbal products? The patient will most likely tell you it's the naturopath. If we take a look at Steve Jobs, who already has a dislike for surgery, right? He said, I don't like my body being opened up. He's not an expert in the cancer treatment field, but he has this idea in the back of his mind. I wonder if there's something more natural other than surgery that could kill my cancer. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You can't be an expert in any type of field, and it's natural to have those questions. But if someone like this talks to a naturopathic doctor who technically is a licensed doctor and who can market themselves that way. They can call themselves expert in oncology, and they can tell the patient they have extensive experience in treating cancer. Isn't that pretty convincing for this patient to sway in that direction? Also, I'm not here to blame the internet, but up to 94% of cancer patients are looking up their information on the internet. When you're searching on the internet, you're gonna be exposed to actual real good information and misinformation. You're gonna have good websites that are written by proper agencies or hospitals or governments, versus you're gonna have websites that promote black selves or high-dose vitamins as therapy for cancer. But the problem with this is that the overall readability on articles with misinformation is much better than articles with real information. There's actually a study done to show how people would believe in conspiracy theory articles. They gave people different articles to read. One kind is factual article on medical treatment, and the other kind is conspiracy theory articles. And the readers actually ranked them and said the factual articles are harder to read. They contained too much information, too little graphics, and the overall logic is just difficult to follow. On the other hand, however, the conspiracy theory articles really grabbed the reader's attention by using headlines, really shocking words, and they were just overall easier to read. When you hear these words from your doctor's mouth, "You have cancer," it puts you in an emotional state of unimaginable stress. And I think for some people, their life decisions after this point could be very emotionally driven. And unfortunately, it's just way easier to take advantage of people when they're in this vulnerable state. After a cancer diagnosis, patients want to follow a course of treatment that can extend their life as long as possible while maintaining their quality of life as high as possible. That's 100% reasonable. But when you're talking to an actual oncology doctor who are giving you your life expectancy in terms of numbers, giving you treatment successes in terms of percentages, that might sound too clinical or cold. Versus when they're going online and looking at an article about juice cleanses and all the promising benefits presented to them using very strong emotional words instead of actual numbers, it's easier to feel an emotional connection when you're in that vulnerable state. And I think after looking at everything, I really can't fault any single individual for this tragedy to happen. I don't think it's solely Steve Jobs' own fault, although yeah, he needs to take a large portion of responsibility for it, and he did. Later in an interview, he did say he regretted his decision in the beginning. But his decision to try this unproven therapy in the face of this massive uncertainty, it's not that different from similar decisions routinely made by other cancer patients. As a system overall, we really need to put an emphasis on credible sources. If we know that patients are going to go online, we can't tell them to stop browsing the internet. But what we can do instead is to tell them which sources are more credible. They should rely on sources like the National Cancer Institute, the Canadian Cancer Society, versus influencers or other companies that are plainly trying to sell a product. Steve Jobs' example unfortunately showed us that even for those who have the most access to resources, the best expertise available to them at their fingertips, it's still difficult for them to make a good informed decision in the face of so much distraction. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you like this type of storytelling deep dives video essays, let me know in the comments. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!